Welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be looking at some really interesting sources you've shared about coffee. Coffee and Buddhist philosophy, who knew?
It is a fascinating combination, isn't it? What really stood out to me was this idea that something as ordinary as a cup of coffee can be a pathway to mindfulness.
Okay, now I'm intrigued. I get the coffee part, but how does mindfulness come into play?
Well, the sources suggest that it's not just about gulping down your caffeine fix. It's about transforming that everyday routine into a mindful ritual.
A ritual.
Yeah. Imagine, instead of just rushing through the motions, you really pay attention to each step, like the sound of the grinder, the smell of the beans, the warmth of the mug in your hands.
You're using those sensory details to kind of anchor yourself in the present moment.
Precisely. And the sources suggest that this mindful approach can be applied to any activity, not just coffee. It's about finding those pockets of stillness amidst the chaos of daily life.
I like that. Finding stillness in the everyday. One of the sources even mentions a Buddhist parable that illustrates this idea beautifully. It's the story of the student and the teacher sharing a cup of tea.
Ah, yes. A classic reminder that wisdom can be found in the simplest of things.
Right. We don't always need these grand, elaborate experiences to find meaning. Sometimes it's about appreciating the beauty of the ordinary.
Exactly. And your sources suggest that this can actually set a more mindful tone for the entire day.
Okay, so how do we actually, put this into practice? How do we use this coffee ritual to cultivate more mindfulness?
One source talks about the Buddhist principle of right intention. It's about starting your day with a clear purpose.
So, while I'm sipping my coffee, I should be thinking about my goals for the day or how I want to approach my interactions.
That's the idea. It's about bringing intentionality to every aspect of your life, even something as simple as drinking coffee.
But I do wonder, couldn't focusing too much on the ritual itself become another distraction? How do we find that balance between being mindful and getting caught up in the process?
It's about finding what works for you. Maybe it's a simple breathing exercise while you take your first sip, or reflecting on something you're grateful for. It doesn't have to be this big, elaborate thing to be effective.
Right. It's about incorporating mindfulness into the routine without turning the routine into the main focus. What I found really interesting in these sources is this idea that coffee can be more than just a pick-me-up. It can actually be a source of motivation and clarity.
Absolutely. Think of it this way. Each cup becomes an opportunity to realign with your goals. You're not just mindlessly going through the motions, but consciously choosing to be present and set a positive tone.
I love that. It's like hitting the reset button before you dive into the day's craziness.
Exactly. And as you practice bringing that awareness to your coffee break, it starts to spill over into other areas of your life. You'll notice yourself being more present in conversations, more attentive to your surroundings, more intentional in your actions.
It sounds almost too good to be true. Come on, can just drinking coffee really make that much of a difference?
Well, it's not magic. It takes practice and commitment. But the potential is there, and the beauty is you can do it anywhere, anytime.
That's a good point. It's not about adding something else to your already overflowing to-do list, but rather about shifting your mindset around something you're already doing. But what about those of us who don't drink coffee? Can we still, benefit from this mindful approach?
Absolutely. While these sources focus on coffee, the principles apply to any activity. It could be enjoying a cup of tea, taking a moment to appreciate nature, or simply paying attention to your breath. It's about finding those moments in your day where you can pause, breathe, and reconnect with yourself. The key is to make mindfulness a habit, not a one-time thing.
Make it a habit, yeah. One of the things that stood out to me was this idea of appreciating the journey of our coffee. From, the beans being grown to ending up in our cup, that whole process.
Ah, yes, gratitude. It's a big part of Buddhist philosophy. It's about shifting our focus from what we lack to what we have.
So instead of rushing through my morning coffee, what if I took a moment to reflect on everyone and everything that made that experience possible?
That's a great example, and it fosters a sense of interconnectedness, recognizing that even something as simple as a cup of coffee is the result of a lot of effort and collaboration.
And that awareness can lead to more happiness, right?
Yeah,
Appreciating the small things.
Exactly. And that appreciation extends beyond just coffee. It's about being grateful for all the good in our lives, even the everyday things we often take for granted.
Now, we've been talking about mindfulness on a personal level, but the sources suggest it can actually have a ripple effect on the world around us too.
It's true. When we cultivate mindfulness within ourselves, it naturally influences how we interact with others.
It's like that saying, be the change you want to see in the world.
Precisely. When we're more mindful, we're more present and attentive in our relationships. We listen with empathy, speak with kindness, and act with compassion.
So it's not just about our own personal well-being, but about creating a more positive and harmonious environment for everyone.
Exactly. Starting with those small, everyday interactions, a smile to a stranger, a helping hand, a kind word, it all makes a difference.
That's a beautiful message. One of the sources also talked about how mindfulness can enhance our creativity and problem-solving skills.
Absolutely. It allows us to step back from our thoughts and observe them without judgment, creating space for new ideas to emerge.
It's like decluttering your mind to make room for inspiration.
That's a great way to put it. It helps us break free from rigid thinking and see things from a fresh perspective.
So mindfulness isn't just about relaxation, it's about unlocking our full potential.
Exactly. It's recognizing that every moment holds infinite possibilities. And by being present in those moments, we can make choices aligned with our values and goals.
But let's be real, we all have those days where it's tough to stay positive and focused. How can mindfulness help us navigate those rough patches?
That's when mindfulness becomes even more important. It's not about pretending everything is okay or ignoring difficult emotions, but about acknowledging them, accepting them without judgment, and finding a space of peace within ourselves.
It's like riding the waves instead of fighting against the current.
Exactly. Mindfulness gives us the tools to weather those storms with more resilience and grace.
One source also mentions that mindfulness is about recognizing the impermanence of life.
That's a profound concept.
Ah.
Everything changes our thoughts, emotions, experiences. It encourages us to appreciate each moment fully and let go of clinging to the past or worrying about the future.
It's like savoring each sip of coffee knowing this exact experience won't happen again.
Exactly. So, how can we bring more of this mindfulness into our daily lives? What are some practical things we can do?
Yeah, what are some good starting points?
Well, one simple but powerful practice is mindful breathing. You can do this anytime, anywhere. Just bring your attention to your breath, noticing the sensation of each inhale and exhale.
Sounds easy enough, but I imagine it takes some practice to quiet the mind and just focus on breathing.
You're right, it does take practice, but the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And the benefits are worth it.
So, besides mindful breathing, what are some other ways to integrate mindfulness into our routines?
The sources emphasize mindful communication.
Speaking mindfully.
Yes, but also listening mindfully, being truly present in conversations, paying attention not just to the words, but to the underlying emotions and intentions.
It's about listening with empathy and responding with kindness, even when we disagree.
Exactly. Mindful communication is a two-way street. And, it's not just about improving relationships with others, but also about deepening the connection we have with ourselves.
It's about listening to ourselves with compassion.
Precisely. That inner peace we cultivate through mindfulness has a ripple effect on our outer world, allowing us to be our best selves.
This has been really insightful. I'm starting to see how mindfulness can be a part of so many aspects of our lives, from coffee to conversations.
I'm glad to hear that. And remember, this is just the beginning. Mindfulness is a lifelong journey with endless possibilities for growth.
I think we have time for one last question before we wrap up this part of our deep dive. One source mentioned mindful movement. What does that even mean?
It's about bringing awareness to our bodies as we move. Whether it's yoga, walking, or stretching, the key is to pay attention to the sensations of movement, feeling the strength and flexibility of our bodies.
So it's not about pushing yourself to your limits.
Not necessarily, no. It's about connecting with our bodies in a mindful way. Noticing the sensations of our muscles stretching, our breath flowing, our feet connecting with the ground.
It's like bringing that same intentionality to our physical experience.
Precisely. And as we cultivate that awareness, we may notice things like tension or discomfort, which can give us insights into our well-being.
It's like our bodies are always talking to us, and mindfulness allows us to listen. Well, this has been a fascinating exploration of mindfulness and its connection to everyday life. I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation.
Me too. We'll delve into more practical tips and techniques for integrating mindfulness into your routine.
Sounds great.
It's all about creating those little pauses throughout your day, moments where you can just breathe and reconnect with yourself. And, make mindfulness a regular thing, a part of your life, not just a sometimes thing.
That makes sense. It's about building that habit. One thing that really resonated with me from the sources was this emphasis on appreciating the journey of our coffee, like from the farmers who grew the beans, all the way to the person who actually brewed it.
That's a great point you bring up. Gratitude. That's a key element of Buddhist philosophy, isn't it? Kind of shifting our perspective, from scarcity to abundance.
Absolutely. You mentioned earlier that sometimes you find yourself kind of rushing through your morning coffee. What if instead of doing that, you use that time to really think about the journey those beans took to get to your cup?
That's a really good example. Taking a moment to appreciate all the effort that went into creating that experience, it really does foster a sense of interconnectedness, doesn't it?
It does. It's about recognizing that even simple things, like a cup of coffee, they're the result of so much hard work and collaboration. And that awareness, that gratitude, it can really boost our overall happiness.
Absolutely. And this gratitude thing, it extends beyond coffee, right? It's about appreciating all the good things in our lives, even the small everyday moments that we often overlook.
That's so true. We've been focusing on mindfulness on a personal level, but the sources suggest that it can actually have a ripple effect, like impacting the world around us.
That's a really powerful idea, isn't it? When we practice mindfulness, it naturally extends outward into our interactions with others.
It's like that saying, be the change you want to see in the world.
Exactly. When we're more mindful, we're more present and attentive in our relationships, aren't we? We're more likely to listen with empathy, speak with kindness, and act with compassion.
So it's not just about our own personal well-being, it's about creating a more positive and harmonious environment for everyone.
Absolutely. And it all starts with those small, everyday acts of kindness, doesn't it? A smile to a stranger, a helping hand to someone in need, a kind word to a loved one.
Those small gestures can make a big difference. One of the sources also talked about how practicing mindfulness can actually boost our creativity and problem-solving skills.
That's so true. Mindfulness allows us to step back from our thoughts and observe them without judgment, right? Creating space for new ideas and perspectives.
It's like decluttering your mental desktop to make room for inspiration.
Love that analogy. It really does help us break free from those rigid thought patterns and approach challenges with fresh eyes.
So it's not just about relaxation. It's about unlocking our full potential mentally and creatively.
Exactly. Recognizing that every moment holds so many possibilities, and when we're present in those moments, we can make choices that align with our values and goals.
Now, let's be realistic. We all have those days where it feels impossible to stay positive and focused, right?
Yeah.
How can mindfulness help us navigate those, tough times?
It's during those challenging times that mindfulness becomes even more crucial. It's not about pretending everything is okay or suppressing difficult emotions. It's about acknowledging those feelings, accepting them without judgment and finding a space of peace within ourselves.
So it's kind of like riding the waves instead of trying to fight against the current.
You got it. Mindfulness gives us the tools we need to weather those storms with more resilience and grace.
One source also mentions that mindfulness is about recognizing the impermanence of life, how everything is constantly changing.
That's a powerful concept, isn't it? Everything is in constant flux, our thoughts, our emotions, our experiences. Recognizing this impermanence can help us appreciate each moment more fully and let go of clinging to the past or worrying about the future.
It's like savoring each sip of that coffee, knowing that this exact experience won't happen again.
Exactly. So how do we actually bring more of this mindfulness stuff into our everyday lives? Beyond just our morning coffee routine, what are some practical things we can try?
Yeah, give us some ideas. Where do we start?
Well, one really simple but powerful technique is mindful breathing. You can do this anytime, anywhere. Simply bring your attention to your breath, noticing the sensation of each inhale and exhale.
It sounds simple enough, but I can imagine it takes some practice to quiet the mind and just focus on the breath, doesn't it?
You're absolutely right. It definitely takes practice. But the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And, the benefits, totally worth the effort.
What are some other ways to, weave mindfulness into our daily routines?
Well, the sources really emphasize mindful communication.
Mindful communication. So speaking mindfully.
Yes, but it's also about listening mindfully, truly being present in conversations, paying attention not just to the words being spoken, but also to the underlying emotions and intentions.
So it's about listening with empathy and responding with kindness, even when we might disagree with what's being said.
Exactly. Mindful communication is a two-way street. And, it's not just about improving our relationships with others, it's also about fostering a deeper connection with ourselves.
Because when we listen to ourselves with that same compassion and understanding, we can create a more harmonious inner dialogue.
Right.
We're not just reacting to our thoughts and emotions, but responding to them with more intention and awareness.
Exactly. And you know what? That inner peace we cultivate through mindfulness, it has a ripple effect on our outer world. It allows us to show up as our best selves in all areas of our lives.
I love that. This has been such an insightful conversation. I'm really starting to grasp how mindfulness can be woven into so many different parts of our lives, from our morning coffee routine to our interactions with others.
I'm glad to hear that. And, this is just the beginning. Mindfulness is a lifelong journey with endless possibilities for growth and transformation.
I think we have time for one last question before we move on to the final part of our deep dive. One source talked about something called mindful movement. Can you explain what that is and how it connects to mindfulness?
Sure, mindful movement is all about bringing awareness to our bodies as we move. Whether we're doing yoga, walking, or even just stretching, the key is to pay attention to the sensations of movement, to really feel the strength and flexibility of our bodies.
So it's not about pushing ourselves to our limits or striving for, some level of fitness.
Not necessarily. It's more about connecting with our bodies in a mindful way, noticing things like, the sensations of our muscles stretching, our breath flowing, our feet connecting with the ground. It's about appreciating, the miracle of being able to move our bodies freely.
I love that. It's like bringing that same awareness and intention that we've been talking about to our physical experience.
Exactly. And as we cultivate that awareness, we might start to notice patterns of tension or discomfort in our bodies, which can give us valuable insights into our overall well-being, both physically and emotionally.
It's like our bodies are constantly communicating with us, and mindfulness allows us to tune in and listen, right? This has been such a fascinating exploration of mindfulness and how it connects to our everyday lives.
I agree. And in the final part of our deep dive, we'll explore some more practical tips and techniques for integrating mindfulness into your daily routine beyond what we've already discussed.
Sounds good. Welcome back to our deep dive into mindfulness. We've spent some time now talking about how to bring this practice into our lives, even through something as simple as enjoying our morning coffee.
Right. And now we're going to explore how you can bring mindfulness into other parts of your daily routine.
We were talking about mindful movement right before the break. Can you give us some more specific examples of what that could look like?
Of course. One of the simplest ways is to bring mindfulness to walking. Instead of rushing to wherever you're going, try to walk with a sense of purpose. Pay attention to how your feet feel on the ground, the movement of your legs, even the rhythm of your breath.
So instead of thinking about everything I need to do, I should focus on the actual experience of walking.
Exactly. And if you do that, you might notice things you never noticed before. The feeling of the sun on your skin, the sounds of birds, the smells in the air.
It's like waking up to the world all around me.
That's a great way to put it. You can even try bringing this kind of awareness to everyday tasks, like washing the dishes.
Washing dishes.
Yeah. Instead of looking at it as a chore, you can approach it with a sense of curiosity. Feel the warm water, the texture of the soap, the smoothness of the plates.
You're turning something ordinary into a mindful moment.
That's the idea. It's not just about physical tasks either. You can do the same thing with mental activities, like say, the next time you're working on a project, take a few moments to ground yourself. Notice your posture, your breath, any tension you might be holding in your body.
It's like creating a space for focus.
Right, exactly. You've been studying Buddhist philosophy for a while. Have any of the principles we've been talking about really resonated with you personally?
I think the idea of finding wisdom in everyday objects has really stuck with me. I think, like a lot of people, I'm so focused on achieving big goals that I forget to just be present and appreciate the little things.
I think that's something we all struggle with, It's so easy to get caught up in chasing the future that we miss out on the beauty of right now.
It's like that parable we talked about earlier with the student and the teacher sharing a cup of tea. It's a reminder that we don't need these big, fancy experiences to find meaning.
That's a good point. And sometimes it's the simplest things that can teach us the most valuable lessons.
Absolutely. What's really fascinating to me is how mindfulness isn't just about personal well-being. It's also about developing compassion for others. The sources talked about how practicing mindfulness can actually improve our relationships and help us contribute to a more harmonious world.
Right, and that's because when we practice mindfulness, we become more aware of our own thoughts and feelings. And that self-awareness helps us to be less reactive and less likely to project our own, negativity onto others.
It's like we create a space between our emotions and our actions, allowing us to react with kindness instead.
I like that. And, that can have such a positive ripple effect on our relationships. When we communicate mindfully, we listen with empathy, speak with intention, and just like show up more fully in our interactions.
So it's not just about finding inner peace, it's about extending that peace outward into our relationships.
Exactly. Mindfulness really allows us to see how connected we are to everything and everyone. It reminds us that we're all part of this, this web of life, and that even our smallest actions can impact those around us.
It's a powerful reminder that we're not isolated individuals, that's for sure.
One thing that really stands out to me is that mindfulness isn't just a personal practice. It's a way of being in the world.
That's a really good point. And when we approach life with that mindset, with that mindfulness, we can experience the beauty of the present moment, build deeper connections with others, and help to create a more compassionate world.
Absolutely. It all begins with those small, everyday moments of awareness.
Well, this deep dive has been truly enlightening. I feel like we've uncovered so much about mindfulness, how it can be integrated into, well, pretty much every aspect of our lives.
It's been a great conversation. And remember, this is just the beginning. Mindfulness is a journey, not a destination.
Right. There's no right or wrong way to practice. It's about finding what works for you and making it a part of your everyday life, one mindful moment at a time.
That's beautifully said.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. I hope this conversation has inspired you to explore mindfulness and discover its incredible potential in your own life.